for joining us. My name is Nadia, and I am a recreational tree climbing facilitator. I have been attending the Tree Climbing Rendezvous, the global events, since 2016. And in the past couple of years, I became involved with the group to actually do part of the organizational aspects of the meeting. And it's been very rewarding. As I was trying to figure out what the Florida Climbing Group could do for this world event that we're having in the cloud, I remembered that the very first time that I did a footlock was actually not when I took my basic tree training class. It was actually when I took some aerial classes from Cheval. And when I thought about that, and I thought, wow, it was years later that I then discovered tree climbing. And I always loved heights and I always loved climbing, but unfortunately, the aerialist type of climbing was not for me. I was really bad at it and I was not very graceful. And I found my passion in tree climbing. And as I did that, I learned that a lot of what I had learned from Corey translated into tree climbing, and it helped me become a better climber. I also learned that in the world of tree climbing, we use a lot of gadgets and equipments and fun things that help us get up in the tree. And I found out that some of that equipment could really help aerialists, and that's the reason for this video. So I would like for you to meet two of my friends, Lynn and John. Lynn is an aerialist and John is an arborist. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Lynn Polke, and I'm a former circus aerialist, and I got to meet Nadia here at Two Hawk Hammock when we were climbing trees. And I was so excited because I had been an aerialist, and as you get a little older, it's harder to get up there, and I hadn't been up in the air in a long time. So when I had the opportunity to climb up into a tree, I was so excited. And using the tree climbing safety aspects that she teaches really helped a lot too, so that I could get back up in the air and sit up in a tree. Another thing that we're exploring today and going to be talking about is the fact that aerialists are oftentimes asked, hey, could you do an act up in that tree? And for the most part, we all say, oh, no, we don't like to rig in trees. But come to find out, arborists have a lot of knowledge that they could impart to us and help us safely climb up in trees. So we're really excited to share this information with you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Colburn. I'm a certified arborist. I've known Nadia for about 5 years, and we hang out with the recreational climbing group in Gainesville, Florida. My significant other is also involved with recreational climbing, and so we all have a great time together. A couple of years ago, I met some people here at Two Hawks Hammock, and they are aerialists and tree climbers as well now. And now we're starting to become aerialists a little bit ourselves. So it's just nice to be able to have that conversation and talk to people about how the things that we do in trees merge with what aerialists are doing in gyms and now might be doing in trees as well. Today we're going to set a few anchor points for rigging, kind of tree style, but you might see some translative capability in what you do as an aerialist too. Nice to meet everybody.
So, I'm pretty excited here. I think I found a tree. And as an aerialist, well, it's up to you to help me out with this. I'm going to show you what we have today. It's a single point apparatus. There's several, but this one's called a silk. And it consists of a carabiner, a swivel, a carabiner, and a rescue 8. Think you can help me hang this up in the tree?
I think we can. Along with whether we can hang it in the tree is the question of whether we should, and how we should. So looking at this tree, it's a live oak. It's got thick bark. There's a few large limbs, and it's good to make a placement that's a little bit back further from the tips of the limbs so that the bending moment of the branch doesn't mess with your routine. That also makes it safer and less likely to have a structural issue when it's weighted. So we're going to look at a couple anchors today that achieve that. we have some ring and rings that have a ring on one side of a strap and a ring on the other side of the strap that's larger, and we can take advantage of the two different sizes of those rings in order to put it just about anywhere on the branch that we want to. If you already know that there's a crotch in your tree branch that is suitable for your installation, then we don't really need to worry about that so much, perhaps. And we can just throw a throw line with a throw weight over the crotch, tie it to a rope, and haul it back over that crotch. We'll just talk about more of the finesse of those things, storing them so you can do it for next time, the advantages of them with respect to whether a tree has thick or thin bark, the movement of the aerialist when they're doing falls and drops and things like that. We'll just talk about that whole ecosystem of things that work together to give you an optimal installation. Here's some equipment that arborists and other tree climbers use to access, place lines and access trees. The first thing that we usually start off with is some kind of throw line that's a small diameter, and we generally attach a throw weight to it. There's different ways to do this. For instance, with a figure 8 that's got a slit bite at the end. Some people choose to put a permanent loop in theirs, and you can stick that loop up through the ring here and over the bag and girth hitch it down. After tossing those over a limb, we'll use some kind of crafty method, and we'll show that in a bit, to install a friction saver over the branch. These are also called ring and rings, cambium savers, different words for them. And the principal similarity between all of them is that you can take an object like this ring here that's a specific size, and you can draw it through one, but when you go to draw it through the other, it doesn't go through. So it's a size exclusion technique. And so we're going to take advantage of that to install these systems. The friction savers can be bigger, they can be even bigger, and they can look very different from each other, but at the end of the day they have two different sized rings. We also have these shackles that are a fairly new invention in arboriculture, and they have a slick pin that you can shove in and shove out rather quickly, and so we're going to use those today. Here's an arborist line. This is Teufelberger ecstatic. It's got fairly low elongation, so it doesn't stretch very much, and it's rated for about 7,000 to 9,000 pounds of tensile strength over a 10-foot section. So just stuff like that we use for making our installations. Also, for throw lines, it's important to flake them when you store them, and so here's a tarp system. I flake it onto the tarp and I fold the tarp over. Here is a throw cube, and you just pile it in there loosely flaked into that. So there's different ways that you can store these. If you've got a sock and some sand at home and some kind of string, you don't need this fancy kit. You can still do that for a reasonable throwing height. Anyways, that's some of the equipment that we're going to use, and we'll get to showing you how to install these this equipment right away. Stand clear. I just use a series of 3 or 4 square knots. This bend of rope, which is unlikely to catch on anything, will go over the branch nice and smoothly. For this installation, figure 8 is nice to make. The figure 8 needs to be dressed so that the knot looks symmetrical. And each of the 4 ends coming out of it needs to be tightened up. It's nice to manage the excess slack and just kind of stow it out of the way. The advantages of this installation are that it's fairly straightforward. It requires less gear and it's simpler. The disadvantages are that if you're on a small limb or a limb that has thinner bark, there may be movement of the rope across the limb that damages the tree or makes it less suitable for the aerialist because of the movement associated with the system.
So, I'm ready now to hook up the silk. Alrighty. Put the carabiner on here.
Got it attached?
We're attached.
Great. I'm going to haul this up and then I'm going to walk around the back of the tree and anchor the system to the trunk. I'm going to tie an alpine butterfly on this one. I could tie a figure 8 if I wanted to, but this is another cool knot that arborists use on the middle of a line to make attachments. If you're going to use an alpine butterfly or a figure 8, practice it and look it up on videos on the internet to make sure that you get it installed the correct way. This is a quickie shackle and we're just going to stick that on there. Technically, these quickies are not rated to be in contact with the tree trunk. You can mitigate that by sticking a piece of rubber between the quickie and the tree trunk. On this tree, since it's got such thick bark, and we might have it in the air anyways, I'm just going to snug it up here like this. And then we're going to go over to the silks and go ahead and take the slack out of the system.
So great. So is it okay for me to test it now and make sure that it can hold weight
Take it
of
away.
an aerialist? Okay. Oh, this feels great.
Now, Lynn is putting her body weight on this to test it.
Gracefully.
Typically in arboriculture, we put the weight of 2 people on it without loading it in a dynamic fashion. Up top, we're making sure that the anchor system is not in the business of the tree branch. We want it to be slightly below that, or further below that is fine also, just to make sure that the tree branch isn't impacting the system. There are typically commands that we use, language that we use in these cases. For an arborist it would be rope. For an aerialist perhaps it would be Lynn.
Clear, heads up.
Stand clear, just so that everybody knows that you're taking a piece of equipment out of the tree.
Headache.
When Lynn has taken her gear off the rope, we can reinstall the throw line into the crotch, and that way when you come back the next day or the next week, you can already have your throw line installed. The throw line is not life support rated gear, and so there's no problem with leaving it outdoors for multiple days. Tie them to each other, you can tie them to the tree, whatever you want to do to secure them so that they stay in place. I'm going to start my installation by running the throw line through the large ring. And I'm going to flake out a bit of slack so that I have enough to throw up over the branch with that. When I've got that, I'm going to reflake it backwards because I want to make sure that the end that I start with is at the top of the pile, not at the bottom. If it's at the bottom, it will try to go up through all those flaked sections and it will tangle. Now I'm going to tie this off with a figure 8 on a slipped bite. Cinch it down nice and tight, and I'm ready to throw this. Throwing, stand clear. So now you can see that the throw weight is not going to go through this ring, and I can start hauling this up into the canopy. And now I've got an anchor point that the rope can run through without touching the limb at all. I'll attach my climbing line to this. And this time I'll need to tie to the tip of the rope so that it gets through both the rings. You remember last time I tied back away from it a bit and I had a bite that I was hauling off the branch, hauling over the branch. So this time I'm going to get a little bit close to the tip of the rope. And it's still just a square knot. If it gets too close, then it'll come off the rope, so you do want it to be back from the rope a little bit. I generally do 2 square knots like that in series, close to the tip. And then I do my third just a little bit further away. So that's ready to go back up and through the rings. I'm going to pull on this side, send it up. through nice and smooth. Got it back in my hand. Untie this. And now I've got a system that I can, stick the same figure eight into, and then attach the aerial apparatus to that figure eight.
Now that the tree is safely secured and the silk is secured, we'd like to introduce Liz Bouton from the Gainesville
At the beginning of the video, every ring and ring system has a size exclusion assistant. In this case, it's this ring that fits through one of the rings but not the other. In the case of this system, it's simply a square knot that's tied in the rope. It will get through one of the rings, the big one, but not the small one. I'm going to set this down because we're not going to use it in this system. If you do two square knots, it'll get stuck. So you have to pay attention to whichever one it is in your system that does this job. Okay, so we send this up. You make sure that you tie the square knot on the side with the large ring. If you tie it on the side with the small ring, then you'll be stuck. And you will have to access the tree to retrieve it. Now we have a piece of equipment that's going to be falling out of the air. And so we say, stand clear, loose equipment. And we have retrieved our ring and ring. We've installed our system here over an anchor point up high. Here's the alpine butterfly going to your apparatus. And so we pull that up into the canopy, leaving a tail so that you can retrieve it. Here's the tail. It's starting to go off the ground, so I'm not going to put it up any higher. I'm just going to leave it there for now. Now I want to set this anchor with multiple wraps in it so that there's more friction at the base of the tree. That's good to do if the tree has less friction on the bark than another tree. We did a live oak earlier. This is a laurel oak, and as you can see, the bark still has some bumps in it and some friction, but it is smoother than the live oak bark. And so this is an example for us to just think about what we would do in that case. I'm going to tie my alpine butterfly. There's lots of base ties. Arborists go crazy about different base ties, so you can go as deep as you want into it. This one's nice because it's simple and it happens on the same rope. And I'm just going to take my rope bag and walk around the tree a few times with it. Out of the way. And this alpine butterfly is the one that I want to attach to here. So I'll go ahead and do that. The slick pin's pointing outwards. I want to tension it up, so I'm just going to go ahead and walk it back around. Check it, make sure the slick pin is still out, and then I'm going to weight test it with my full body weight. Normally we do that with 2 arborists' body weight or 2 people's body weight, but nowadays with coronavirus you might consider doing it with 1. So here you have 2 wraps around the tree, and you can do this indefinitely. You can do 10 wraps around a tree if it's really slick bark like a eucalyptus or something like that. That's it. I'm an ISA qualified tree risk assessor. As assessors, we look for certain things in trees and use certain standardized processes to determine a risk for instance, an anchor point that you would install in one of your own tree branches. While I can't make an assessment of risk for your individual circumstance, I can talk about some those general processes that we use, and that's my goal today. If you want to find an ISA qualified risk assessor, go to the ISA Trees Are Good webpage and use the Find an Arborist function to locate one that's near you. First of all, trees are unrated anchor points. Other rope access disciplines have rated anchor points, and that's probably what you're accustomed to. A lot of tree branches are overrated for the weights that you need to apply to them, and that's the good news. And then, of course, the other side of it is that occasionally there's a bad tree limb that's got a bad structure in it that could fail under some circumstance. So it's important to be aware of what the risk is and make a decision if the risk is within your tolerances. And that's what a tree risk assessor helps to do. On the flip side, trees are really great for mental wellness. That's a documented phenomena of them. So if you're putting an anchor point in a tree and working in it, that's probably a really good thing for you. So I encourage you to go out and give it a try if that's within the bounds of your discipline. As tree risk assessors, we identify structures in the trees that might be an issue. We also identify the targets, particularly we identify the importance of the target and the occupancy of the target. And then thirdly, we identify any protection factors between the structural issue and the target. Lastly, we also do our assessments over a certain period of time, and so that time is identified by a tree manager and an arborist working together. It might be 8 years for your kid who's 10 years old and going off to college when they're 18, and you want to know if that anchor point's going to last for 8 years. Or it might be 6 months because of coronavirus and the vaccine that may be soon coming. So that will be specified in your risk assessment if you choose to have one. So that process is used to go through a series of matrices of qualitative risk, low, medium, high kind of thing. And the end is that you get an overall risk rating that is low, moderate, high, or extreme. Along with that risk rating is ways to mitigate the risk and the resulting expected risk if the mitigation is undertaken. So it's a very formal procedure, and you get really good actionable information with which to make decisions. Specifically, tree risk assessors look at structures in trees. Behind me I've got a live oak here, and it's got some acute junctions in it. And some of those acute junctions have dead bark between the two branches, which can be a poor attachment. It just doesn't stick together very well. The broader junctions usually have the bark sloughing off, so we look for those kinds of things. Also, we look for basics like, is the tree root crown have good structures also? Does it have fungi that are growing in it? Same with the trunk. Are there open cavities, things like that? We look at the leaf flush to see if the leaf flush is comparable throughout the tree crown, or if it's different in some places than in others. We look for dead branches, dead wood, anything that could fall on the area where the installation would be placed. So those are a few of the things that we look at. There are many, many others. Also, as a general rule, it's good to have your installation closer in towards the trunk. If you get out too far on the branch, there's a lot of force applied to that branch, which is a lever. And that means that there's a greater chance for failure, but there's also more movement in your system, and usually you want your anchor point to be still. So try to get as close to the tree trunk as you can without hitting the tree trunk, obviously. The tie-in point, wherever your system is resting across, should not be moving. If it is, that will rub the tree branch. And some species that have thinner bark, rubbing that tree branch can really be bad over a short term. In other cases, over the long term, a tree with thick bark like this live oak back behind me can even suffer the consequences of having rope rubbed across it repetitively. Your rope can also suffer those consequences, so it's worth thinking about. If you notice any rubbing of the rope across the tie-in point, reconsider the formation of your anchor and redo it a little bit. As it's worth talking about helmet use. If you have things falling from above in the tree infrequently, eventually one of them is going to fall. Tree climbers always use helmets, and aerialists generally don't, from my knowledge. So you have to decide within your discipline whether you are going to wear a helmet or not. And I think it's just good to convey that there are actually circumstances where a helmet is useful in a tree, and so don't put it aside without consideration. That's about it. Overall, I want to encourage you to get out in those trees and consider doing aerial work out in them, and consider the benefits of it, and consider getting a ISA qualified tree risk assessor out to assess your anchor point as you make a system that's appropriate for you. Thank you. For various tree safety and climbing access techniques as well. Eric Fulmer, our event coordinator for Tree Rendezvous 2020, has made up one of these as material for a course, and you can benefit from that if you watch the video that's on the link for that. We'll also have links for tree risk assessing and things like that, so you can kind of get a sense for what's encompassed on that. So check out those links at the end of the video, and go be in trees.